because they have these very big businesses in Macau now, very big casinos, some of them much bigger than the ones in Las Vegas. And so, that part of the U.S. economy will be prospering temporarily, but it'll create a bust in China, just like it creates a bust in America or England or France or Mexico or anywhere else whenever the central bank, ours is called the Federal Reserve, steps on the gas and prints too much money. That's what happened in 2008 when we had the bubble in real estate that burst. It was right after a bubble that was created in the stock market yet again in 2000. That bubble burst, and we had a recession thereafter. It wasn't nearly as bad as the '08 recession, but it was a recession, very deep recession, and that's what's going to happen in economy in China, I believe.
So the thing that we're concerned with is obviously, I mean, it's a little bit of a flex that they're copying something that our Federal Reserve did years and years ago, but the end result will not be exactly what they're hoping for. So have they really looked at this? Like, what do we know about their thought process for implementing this, knowing that the possibility, the end of it could be that?
Well, it's interesting, our politicians are always short-sighted because they're always looking to make themselves look good before the next election. Because you've got a dictatorship in China, but they still want to be popular. They don't want to be overthrown, even if you're a dictator, especially in a country with over 1 billion people. And so what our politicians and politicians all over the world do is they know this. They can study the history as well as you or I can. And they know that they can pump up the economy, especially before an election, like in our economy, which is what they're doing now, which is sort of a feeble attempt to cut interest rates a couple of weeks ago by the Federal Reserve to help the Kamala Harris campaign. But that seems to have backfired because mortgage rates are going back up this week. And so they know that, but the game is to make themselves look good temporarily. And then when the crash happens, they blame somebody else. It was like the Biden administration created all this inflation with the help of the Federal Reserve, printing money to finance all of their endless spending programs. And now they're blaming corporations for price gouging, which is very silly. It's sort of the propaganda tool the Democrats always use. If these corporations had the ability to just willy-nilly raise prices like they do now, why don't they do it all the time? All of a sudden, Kamala Harris is running for president. All of a sudden, they decide, let's make more money with price gouging. It makes no sense at all. So it's just a rhetorical mumbo-jumbo. They're hoping that American voters are so ignorant that they will fall for this, the price gouging thing. And Chinese communist politicians are politicians. They don't want to make the public too angry with them. There's always a threat of a revolution or a revolt, even in communist country like China, which is, moved away from pure communism, of course, but their government still is Communist Party of China. And so I think they're doing the same thing basically that our politicians do, trying to make themselves look good temporarily. And from their perspective, they probably think, well, maybe that'll invite more foreign investment in China. If they can brag that their economy is growing more robustly, there might be more foreign investment in China.
Well, I think what they're missing is that there is no shortcut to economic prosperity. Good policy year over year brings good prospects. It's actually a complex mix. You can't just have good policy. You also have to have a business environment, a regulatory environment, and you have to have people who are producing products, goods, and services. And then you have to have people who are earning money to be able to purchase it. So, the communist paradigm goes against the free market system, and it's kind of hard for them to, kind of pick and choose little bits of it that they want to stick into their communist reality. I think it's interesting that they're at least acknowledging this is an acknowledgement that their system doesn't really work and ours does. As flawed as ours is, it's far better than what they're working with. And I think that's the big takeaway here among the other details that you shared. Thomas DiLorenzo, president of the Mises Institute. Thank you, sir, for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Underdog Moicano wins UFC fight, bashes Macron in France, promotes Hapa by Phil Bishop. An audio Mises Wire narrated by Millian Quinteros. This past February, Brazilian UFC fighter Renato Moicano went viral after taking the microphone after a victorious fight to promote the work of Ludwig von Mises. In his own words, "If you care about your mother effing country, read Ludwig von Mises and the 6 Lessons of the Austrian School." Today, at UFC Fight Night 243, Moicano returned to the octagon as a strong underdog against French fighter Benoit Saint-Denis. What oddsmakers didn't take into account was there was no way Renato Moicano was going to lose on Ludwig von Mises' birthday weekend. Moicano dominated the first round of the fight, landing heavy blows before controlling his opponent on the ground. While the second round featured a strong performance between the two fighters, the damage inflicted in the first round was ruled to be enough to end the fight by the officials. Following being declared the winner, Moicano once again took the mic. F Macron. F the globalists. F all of these mother effing globalists trying to push this politically corrupt agenda. If you want to talk about politics and the economy, read Democracy, the God That Failed by Hans Hermann. I hope you will understand that democracy is a fallacy. Please read Hans Hermann Hoppe and understand why the world is going crazy like that today. Renato Moicano reflects a rising, growing global recognition of the works of the Austrian school. Groups like our friends at the Mises Institute Brazil have done remarkable work normalizing thinkers like Mises and Hoppe. Unfortunately, the tyranny of their regime has made their critiques of the modern state increasingly relevant to the general population. For those interested in following Renato Moicano's advice, the audiobook of Democracy, the God That Failed is available for free at Mises.org. The book is also available at the Mises bookstore. Congratulations to Mr. Moicano, we can't wait to see your next fight. Our Renato Moicano shirt is also available at the Mises bookstore. For more content like this, visit Mises.org. Contribution to Libertarian Social Thinking by David Gordon. An audio Mises Wire narrated by Millian Quinteros. John Hasnas, who teaches law and philosophy at Georgetown University, has written one of the most valuable books about libertarian theory that has appeared in several decades. Its principal value is that, although Hasnas has not been influenced very much by Ludwig von Mises and Murray Rothbard, he arrives at many of their insights in his own way, often adding illuminating details. In what follows, I'll try to indicate a few of these. Hasnas argues that mainstream neoclassical economists who are quick to call for the state to fix alleged market inefficiencies rely on a false dichotomy. Their contention is that the market works fine if two people engaged in exchange bear all the costs of their actions. In that case, both parties benefit. Each is better off by his own lights. Sometimes, though, economic actors can pass some of the costs of their action onto others. A polluter might not care that his production emits soot near his factory, as he does not live in the neighborhood. In cases such as this, it is alleged the state must step in to require people to internalize their externalities. In that case, each person bears the costs of his economic actions, and there is no gap between individual benefit and social benefit. Economists who argue in this way are ignoring the gorilla in the room. Hasnas refers here to a classical experiment in which those who were watching a video of people passing a basketball did not notice that someone in a gorilla costume had entered the video. The people had been asked to count the number of times the ball was exchanged, losing sight of what was in front of their eyes. The gorilla in the room that those who demand the state step in ignore is that our ancestors devised rules within which market activity could take place. And these rules were the products of human action, but not of human design. In small groups living together, it is essential that resort to arbitrary violence be avoided. People will work out arrangements that vary according to custom, but in all cases aim to deflect violent conflict. which disrupts everyone's plans. In brief, the market failure economists do not take account of the existence of civil society, but wrongly assume that there is nothing intermediate between self-interested maximizers and the state. If it is counter to this that civil society is the creation of the state, Hasnas has a clever retort. The state extracts money from people in taxes and thus could not exist unless people had resources to give it. The system Hasnas had in mind is embodied in the common law of England, which grew from precedent to precedent after the collapse of the Roman Empire. Here, the dominant aim of the law was to restore an injured person to a condition as close as possible to his earlier condition. Blood feuds were inimical to group survival and were replaced by a system of fines, setting forward the compensation that would be exacted for each type of wrong. Hasnas notes a system of this sort is not a mere theoretical construct, but existed in Ireland for 1,000 years. Those who refuse to accept the ruling of a recognized judge, perhaps after one of two appeals, would be treated as outlaws in a society in which isolation meant a sentence of death. Those who were willing to accept the court's judgments but couldn't pay the fines could be compelled to work for their victims until the fine was paid off. It would be to the advantage of victims to treat these temporary slaves well so that they could get their compensation as soon as possible. Readers of Murray Rothbard on the common law will not find any of this surprising. It might be objected that the fines were in some cases morally unfair. For example, injuring a wealthy person would require greater compensation